Hello friends, I am Chevee. Welcome to my shed. How are you today? How's life in your world? How's things where you are? I hope it's all great and fantastic and wonderful. Today we're going to talk about a board game. We're going to talk about my new obsession, Ark Nova from Fjordland and Capstone Games. Capstone Games published it in the US English market. And this is a game by Mathias Wigge. We're going to go with that. I know I've said that I was going to do a review on this on the gaming channel, and I keep saying I'm going to do stuff on the gaming channel, but the reality is this is the time every day that I set aside for talking to camera, and I just need to figure out how to incorporate reviews like this into this normal daily thing, because I just don't find the time to come do these sorts of things. So we're going to try yet another little mini game review here about this, because I've really been obsessing over this, and based on my posts on social media, so have a lot of other people. And I've heard a lot of people talk about how great the game is. I've heard a lot of people question the length of time the game takes, which I get that complaint. And so let's just talk about what it is and what it isn't. First of all, I've heard a lot of people say this is the Terraforming Mars killer. And I don't really get that, like, why are we looking for killers? I don't, that doesn't make any sense to me. What's wrong with Terraforming Mars? It's been out for like 5 years, and my game group still plays it very regularly, and we still love it very, very much. I don't understand why we need a killer of Terraforming Mars. I also don't think this is that game. This isn't that game. But people seem to parallel this to Terraforming Mars a lot, so I'll talk about that as we get into it. I don't see... They're not the same game. Not even close, right? I don't necessarily see this as being a Terraforming Mars killer. I don't really even see this as being a Terraforming Mars parallel. And I'll give you a little bit of explanation about that after we talk about it. So what is Ark Nova? I mean, Ark Nova is a tableau building, engine building card game. So I guess from that standpoint, you could say this is like, Terraforming Mars, but you could also say this is like Race for the Galaxy. In fact, I would say this is more like Race for the Galaxy than it is like Terraforming Mars. That's just my take. Do with that what you will. So in the box, there is a couple of boards. This is called the Association board. That's used by certain actions that you can take in the game. There's a bunch of rules. There's a rule book. There's a glossary that gives you more information. There's an iconography cheat sheet. Remember when I said this is a little bit like Race for the Galaxy? Tons of icons. I have a printed FAQ because there's already been some changes. There are 8 player boards. So in this game, we're not building on a community board. We are building on our own little player boards. We're building a zoo. By the way, this game is about zoo building. We build zoos by placing tiles on this board. This board also has some other information like our partnership zoos and universities that we might partner with, how many associates we have, basically how many workers that we have, a little bit of a worker placement mechanic in there, and some other bonuses that we might gain by filling in spots. There are 8 total maps in the game. There are 4 map A's, which are the beginner maps. There's 4 map zeros, which are the intermediate maps, and there are 8, 0 through, there are 1 through 8. There are 8 experienced player maps. We'll talk about that in a second too, because, well, we'll talk about that. There's also a double-sided board. And the board is double-sided just for one reason, and it is based on how these folders are oriented. These are going to contain cards as we play the game, so there'll be cards on here. And if you want, you can have it so all the cards are sideways between players, or you can have it so that all the cards are facing one player. Other than that, the board's identical on either side. We'll talk about the board in a little bit. The game does not come with these game trays or this bag or this insert. I made this insert for my own copy, but it does come with these plastic inserts that have a whole bunch of tiles and a whole bunch of chits. And we can talk about that in a second. Just wanted to show it to you. Game trays I've included are for holding player pieces. There are 4 player colors. And then the thing that seems to be what people want to keep referencing Terraforming Mars with is all of these cards. There's like 250 cards or something like that in here, 212 of which are the common deck. The deck contains things like animals. I mean, here you got a sloth bear. You might put a sloth bear in your zoo. It contains in-game scoring cards or conservation projects. That's going to be a scoring mechanism, and then it contains sponsors, and sponsors just help your zoo through various ways. So, in some ways, that card mechanic, that having a hand of cards, playing them into your tableau, feels very much like Terraforming Mars, or even, I would say, the Ares Project version of Terraforming Mars. That is that cards give you icons, and cards reference those icons. That feels very familiar, right? And that's not just a Terraforming Mars thing. That's, like I said, a Race for the Galaxy thing. And there are a lot of icons. Remember, there's a whole icon cheat sheet that you're going to need to reference quite a few times in your first few plays because you're going to be completely confused by all these icons. But here's where this game is a little bit of a... It's kind of a little bit of an advantage. Because of the theme, we're building a zoo. We're going to build a zoo by putting animals in enclosures. All of those spots on your player board, all of these places that you can put stuff, hold enclosures. And enclosures are tiles like this 4-space enclosure, this 3-space enclosure, there's 2s, there's 5s, there's 1s. These are enclosures that go on your map. And when you place an animal in your zoo, say you're going to place, oh, that's not an animal, say you're going to place your sloth bear, the sloth bear has to go in a size 3 enclosure. You look at your map, you have a size 3 enclosure available, you flip it over, that now has a sloth bear in it, and your zoo gets built. All of that is grounded in reality, which means that this is a heavy game. This is a big, meaty, heavy game. But you have this cheat sheet for all these icons, you have this glossary, you have this thick rule book because there is so much meat. But it's all super duper intuitive. It all makes sense. So as you're playing this sloth bear, you'll realize that, yeah, this thing cost me $14 and it takes up 3 spots, and whatever it does down here makes sense. Whatever it does down here makes sense. Like, it all just kind of makes sense. Though it might seem overwhelming when you're first learning the game, the way the game plays out makes a whole lot of sense. As far as gameplay, like length, I've heard a lot of people raise concerns about the length of the game. In my experience, it's about 45 minutes per player. I have played solo. Solo games take about 45 minutes. I've played 5 2-player games now, and they take about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours with your first game. And then I played a 4-player game, which took right at about 4 hours. That was also, that was one of those games that there was a whole lot of distractions and a whole lot of talking between turns and that sort of stuff. Plus, it was a learning game, so the actual gameplay might have only taken that 45 minutes per player. I would say the learning curve is a little bit higher, so there's a lot of little details to explain, even though the game is based on a very simple action selection mechanic. So there are 5 things you can do on your turn. You pick one of these and you do it, and then that's your turn. The problem, or not the problem, I mean, I guess it's a problem if you consider decision space. The difficulty with selecting this decision is how many things are tied to each decision. So let's just go through it. With, for instance, cards. This is how you draw cards. There's no other way to get cards in the game into your hand. There are, but this is how you draw cards, right? There are exceptions to all of this. If you take this action, you're going to draw some number of cards. Building. This is how you're going to put new enclosures into play. You pay some money, you put an enclosure down. If you're going to play buildings, you're going to play this card. Again, there are other ways to get buildings. Associations. This is how you're going to use the association board to get things like partner universities, which are these guys, or partner zoos, which are these guys that come from a certain continent. Also, this is how you're going to get the vast majority of your conservation points, which, as I'll show you in a minute, is probably how you're going to win the game. Maybe not, but probably. Conservation points come from base conservation projects. There will be some number of these put out randomly. It's either going to be 3 or 4 based on the number of players. And these all have requirements such as requires different animal zoo category icons. So remember we talked about icons. This one would provide 2. It's a bear and it's a predator. So if you have 3 different icons in your zoo and you take the association action, you get 2 points, 2 conservation points. Most of these will be things like herbivores, so you want to have a lot of herbivores in your zoo. Africa, so you want to have a lot of African animals in your zoo. Association actions are how you're going to be getting this stuff. Where did my cards go? Oh, they're down here. So that was association. Sponsors. This is how you're going to play those sponsor cards. The blue cards. Sponsor cards give you ongoing benefits. So, for instance, this card says every time I play an Australia icon, I can tuck a card under here to gain 2 points. 2 appeal points, which are very, very different from your conservation points. And then lastly, you've got animals. This is how you put animals in your zoo, assuming that you have available enclosures to hold that animal. Again, sloth bear comes out. I need a size 3. Oh, in this instance, I have a size 4. That's good enough, but I can't put him in the size 2. Flip it over, right? So these are the 5 actions that you can do, but there's a whole lot of consideration that goes into those 5 actions because, number 1, let's say building. Building stuff on your zoo map might unlock bonuses based on where you put the tile. So if you put the tile on one of these spaces, you're going to gain a benefit. Okay, placing animals. Animals have all sorts of boost association actions, or they have drawing cards actions, or digging. They also have some cards that can affect other players. You can do what's called a constriction action, or give them venom, so they have to pay extra money each turn, that sort of thing. So playing animals isn't necessarily straightforward. Associations. So when you go on the association track and you take an association, say I'm going to come on here and I'm going to take this partnership zoo. This is the Asian partnership. I'm going to put it on my association track. Based on where it goes, you have to start down here. As you move up, you gain extra bonuses each time you get one. Same thing for universities. If I take a university, each one I get goes up. Taking off associates. Every associate that I hire gets me closer to getting 2 conservation points. Playing those sponsor cards. A lot of them will have, when they come into play, effects. For instance, this one, when it comes into play, I'm going to gain 1 appeal for each Australia icon that I have. So you want to time playing those. What was the last thing? What did I miss? Oh, drawing cards. Drawing cards also causes breaks to happen, and breaks are kind of end of round. There really are no rounds in this game, but there is a break mechanic that resets everything. But it's not a fixed number of turns. It's based on how many times we take a break action, which causes this break track to move up, which I'll show you in a second. And so all of these have all of these parallel decisions. On top of all of that, so do your score tracks. In this game, there are 3 score tracks. We start over here on the appeal track based on player count or player order. You start with 0, 1, 2, or 3 points on the appeal track. This is going to be the track that mostly you'll gain from playing animals. Animals give you appeal to your zoo. They make your zoo more appealing. And they're going to cause this track to go up. There's not really a whole lot tied to this. Remember I said there are some negative cards. If you are below 5 points, you can't be affected by those negative cards. So there's that unlock. There's also some animals that you cannot play once you've hit 25 appeal. So they have to be played early on in your zoo. That's really about all that's tied to your association track. Oh, that's not true. Money. This is income. Association unlocks more and more income as you move up that track. The other 2 tracks, however, have a whole lot of bonuses. So that conservation track, that thing I said was going to be your main game, your main scoring mechanic, is going to unlock bonuses as you hit each of these extra spots. There are bonus tiles. Again, this black bag does not come with the game. I added it because at the beginning of the game, you draw bonus tiles and you put them on these spots. As you land here, you can take one of these bonuses and nobody else can get it, and then it gives you a little bump. So deciding whether you're going to play animals and get more appeal, or you're going to play a conservation project to get some of these tokens, that's a big decision. There's also reputation. Reputation is this little graduation cap, I'm sure there's a name for it, icon. As you move up this track, you get lots of bonuses. This also unlocks these cards, because all of these actions that you can take are double-sided. And if at some point during the game you find an icon like this one that says flip a card, it lets you flip one of these cards over and now you get a bonus. And for a lot of these, for instance playing sponsors and animals, it allows you to start playing cards from this board, meaning you don't have to get them into your hand, you can play them straight off the board. Again, there's a whole lot of decision space, all tied to these basic 5 actions. 5 simple actions, branching decision tree. And that is the exciting part about the game. There are so many points in the game where you're trying to hit a mark, but the things that you have available to you don't provide the ability to hit that mark. And so you have to hedge a turn. You have to, switch gears and change strategies. What I should have mentioned, when you play all of these cards exist underneath of your player board. And when you take an action, the benefit of that action is based on where it's at in this track. So for instance, drawing cards, if this is on spot 1, I get to draw 1 card, then discard 1 card. But if it's on spot 5, I get to draw 3 and discard 1 card. So as these level up, as these move up the chain, they get more and more powerful. The same with playing animals. At 0, at 1, I can't play anything, but at 5, I can play 2. So they get better. Association, building, and sponsor cards. This determines, this position on this track determines how strong of an action you can take. For associations, these actions all have a strength requirement, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this has to be on one of those spots. For sponsors, they have an association cost or a sponsorship cost. So this card has to be at that strength or higher. For building, it's the number of squares or number of hexes that the building can fill is based on where that is in the track. And when you take an action, it moves back to the beginning and everything else shifts down. That's another decision space. So there's really just like a couple of like key moments I can teach. Here's the 5 things you can do, but here's this huge branching decision tree that might earn you all kinds of bonuses, earn you all kinds of new in-game abilities. And you have to really kind of balance all that stuff out. That's the special sauce of the game. Not necessarily that I'm working like to maximize my zoo's particular income versus your zoo's particular income. There's not really a whole lot of like head-to-head in that way. There is some head-to-head in taking stuff off this association board. For instance, these tokens are only refilled when we have a break. Again, breaking happens once we hit a certain threshold on the break track. So if you know, for instance, the Africa card came out early on, and I want to go for this card, I'm going to snatch up the Africa partnership zoo because this counts towards my Africa count, right? I want to get that before you. So I might take the association action early just to snatch that up. You can't have it now. We have to get to a break before you'll have a chance to get it. Same thing for the universities. That is the majority of the head-to-head aspect of the game. Aside from, there are some negative things, you know, Venom and Constriction. You can steal cards from players that are ahead of you on the point track. But there's very few of those cards. And so to go back to the Terraforming Mars thing, the reason I don't think this is a good parallel is, so because there is only a resource in this game, and that is money, there is not an emergent strategy that happens early in the game. You get everybody gets 2 in-game scoring cards, and this might give you goals to shoot towards. They're all basically worth 1 through 4 points. This one's going to give you points for having rock icons in your zoo. This one's going to give you points for not filling up your zoo. These can direct you a little bit in the early game, but this is a much more tactical engine building game, meaning that you really need to respond to the current situation. It's very, very difficult for you to build some sort of ongoing strategy, especially in the early game. You're trying to set up the best engine that you can with very, very limited resources. You only can hold 3 cards in your hand. You can have as many as you want throughout the game, but as soon as we hit break, you can discard down to 3. So you're tempered, essentially, in the early game, which means that you have to be much more reactionary. And for me as a player, I enjoy those tactical decisions, and I am better at those tactical decisions than I am those long-term strategic plays. And so, unlike, you know, other games that this is being compared to, those games have these minute tactical or these minute strategic plays where if I play this card in an early round, it's going to generate me X number of points, and that might make it worthwhile, whereas later in the game it doesn't. This doesn't have that stuff. It does, but it's also a very minor part of the game. This has much more tactical, what is my best option right now, because I need to play this card, and in order to do that, I have to take this step first. That's about as far as you're going to go with this decision tree before you get to this, you know, overwhelming amount of decisions very quickly that may not ever come into play because the cards that are available to you are going to change rapidly. The items that are available are going to change rapidly, and you really have to stay on top of all of that. I love this game. I'm having a blast with this game. I want to play this game a whole lot. And as I said earlier, the zoos, they claim that there is intermediate, beginner, and advanced zoos. Just play the advanced zoos. They're not difficult at all. Capstone also included like a recommended starting hand for each player. I don't know if that was in the original German version, but I don't see... it's not that difficult. It really isn't. If you can explain the 5 basic actions, the rest can be figured out as you play. My fiance doesn't like to have a rules dump thrown at her before we start playing. She likes to let's just play and figure it out. And that worked really well with this game. I was able to say, here's your 5 actions, let's go. And we started playing. And she immediately understood that she had restrictions to playing animals, and she needed to build a zoo, and she needed to, and it just emerged as we played. I think at the end of the first game, we had encountered all of the various rules aspects that she needed to understand, and she had a very firm understanding of how things went. And it was not overwhelming at all. And this is like I said earlier, a pretty heavy game based on that spanning decision tree. This is probably the heaviest game I've taught to her, and we've now played it 4 times. We played it 2 times in one day, maybe even 3 times in one day. We've played it a bunch, and we're probably going to play it a bunch more because we both really, really enjoy it. So, that was like a buckshot take. Probably didn't explain anything as much as I should have, and probably missed a whole bunch. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. I will try to respond to them. And if you have, if you need rules assistance or whatever, I'm always available on Twitter. So there you go, Ark Nova from Capstone Games. I think it's in retail next month. I pre-ordered this. I think I was the first pre-order in the U.S. and I got it a couple weeks ago. So yeah. Thank you for being here as always. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, being amazing friends, wonderful people. I really appreciate you, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Today's word you should know to sound smart is lapping. It is a noun meaning the practice of falsifying account records to conceal a shortage caused by theft or loss, usually by posting a financial transaction to an accounting period other than the one during which it actually took place. Even after Skyler was indicted, he could not accept that lapping was an objectionable practice. Lapping, L-A-P-P-I-N-G. I can tell you from experience that lapping is very, very, very common in the automotive car dealership industry.